Oh my God, y'all. I don't prepare for these things. And every time I get to meet up with Rob, we have to literally force ourselves not to speak so that I can hit record because all the good shit will happen before we hit record if we start talking. So I'm so happy to see you again. So let
Likewise.
me do an intro for you.
Sure.
So I don't prepare introductions. I'm not that kind of a presenter, YouTuber person. I just tell people. So the way that I know Rob from Adeptus Psychonautica is he has a YouTube channel. We started about the same time. We paced each other for subs or whatever. And I didn't know about him and he didn't know about me. And we were closing in on 10,000 subs or something like a year and a half in. And one of my viewers was like, hey, do you know about Adeptus Psychonautica? You'll have to check him out. And so I did. And I'm like, oh my God, how do I not know about this guy? So I hit him up and yeah, that was like a year and a half ago. And
yeah, and it was at that time as well where I was just looking to try out Amanita. And so it was just this kind of synchronicity event because I was kind of, wanting to experience all these different sort of psychedelics and all these different sort of plant medicines. And then, just the universe crossed our paths and here we are.
It's awesome too, because like he feels like my brother across the pond, and I'm his sister in the States. And it's been interesting watching his progression and how he takes sort of the same. Well, I mean, he started out with mostly ayahuasca at first and then branched out into a lot of other psychedelics and entheogens. And it's really cool because he and I approach things very similarly, but it's been interesting to watch how the directions that you go in versus the directions that I go in. And you do shit that scares the bejesus out of me, man. And you go into the confrontational and a lot of really controversial stuff. So can you touch on some of the videos that were like more confrontational and interactive?
Yeah. I think I the way I would think of it is it's more it's the stuff that's kind of I'm opinionated on, but I still try and keep it within. It's always within this kind of realm of psychedelics, and I think there's an element there of stuff that I just want to speak about, or because I have a certain sense of humor, then I think it's kind of it's funny to talk about some of these things, and I think also some along the way there I do blunder into things and things which I might not initially think are controversial or something, and then they end up being that. But I think a lot of what I do is I push back against some of the very kind of mainstream narratives within the sort of psychedelic community, because I think there's a lot of wishy-washy stuff here and a lot of stuff that's kind of bad critical thinking, whereby if it was framed in a different way, then I think perhaps the community would have like a different understanding of these things. So my thing is I'm going through my own journey and I'm going to share how I interpret these things. And I'm not necessarily trying to say that I'm completely right, but I will offer my opinion and offer reasons why. And sometimes that is at the expense of, basically calling out some very entrenched but bad ideas. I would compare it in a lot of ways to calling it almost like religious thinking, because there's some things which just seem to me kind of slightly absurd and like they don't bring any benefit, but they just become entrenched in the psychedelic discourse for no particular reason. And so I kind of I try and push back on stuff like that. And some examples of that would be around people who feel like they have a certain amount of authority on what psychedelics should be, or what is spirituality, or that if you are doing psychedelics, then you should live like this, you should have these beliefs, and you should think like this. And I always try and disconnect those two things. I think there is whatever's going on with your own journey with psychedelics, and I don't think necessarily that would have a predetermined influence on, say, your political beliefs or your ideological beliefs. And so I kind of push back on stuff like that. And also people who who try and act as some kind of authority on psychedelics, which I know you and I have both bumped up again in our comment sections of people saying, no, it's this, you must believe it. I'm like, no, I don't think so. It's, so I always just try and relay my own personal journey and my own personal experience. And I think I piss a few people off along the way, but yeah, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs.
I like that. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about my journey and my purpose and my direction, and I always follow my heart. But as you know, people like us tend to also go, hang on a minute, is my heart not being my ego? Is my ego tricking me into being my heart? Like, am I making sure that I'm being ethical here and moral and doing right and being level-headed? And I know I do it to a fault, to a point where I'll get this feeling like I need to not talk anymore, not help anymore, not, because like, who the hell am I or whatever. And all I did was have the balls one day to wake up and make a video and stick it on YouTube. Like that's all I have. And
but I think that's fine. I think that's the kind of, that's the point I'm getting at. If I think for people like us to share our journeys, and I would mirror exactly what you said. Like, who the fuck am I? I'm not going to tell anybody that this is how it is, and likewise, I'm going to challenge people who will tell you that this is how it is. I want everyone to think for themselves and come to their own conclusions. And I don't really have a sort of much of a dog in the game of like, because I think this about psychedelics, you think this about psychedelics. Like, if someone wants to think it's aliens or portals to another dimension, I think within their own subjective experience, it's fine. But then to start clubbing people over the head and saying, no, you've got it wrong, or no, this. And I think one thing that comes with these experiences, like, they really do highlight how absolutely little we can really be sure of ourselves. And so I think to talk about it like in the way that you talk about it is absolutely fine, because we're talking about our own subjective experience, and it's like, it's a human experience. And that's the bit I actually like. I like hearing people's stories. And I even like hearing my own stories. That's one of the things I love about these experiences. You have one, and then you have to do something with that narrative. You have to, this experience that happens to you, you've then got to sort of get your own meaning from it and sort of and integrate it into your own story. And that's something I like doing. I then like sharing that story. Like, this is what it meant to me. It might not necessarily mean that to you, and it's not like a fundamental truth, but here's my bit of the human story. And maybe that might resonate with some people. It helps people, find their own story and understand a little bit more about other people going through their own journeys. And I think that's absolutely fine. And this is what I like about your channel. You're telling your story, you're going through your journey. And I think that's absolutely something worth sharing.
One of the things that is interesting is, I know in school when we would study history, like the gold rush in America and Australia, and the way the British Empire started to recede, and these massive events that changed the landscape and the people forever. I think, that was weird. What a time to be alive, but those days are over. And then I look at what's happening now, and I'm like, holy shit, we're in one of those periods right now where the United States, we repealed prohibition, and that opened up the landscape for what didn't exist before, was, random people, just sort of bars or whatever, making and selling, to Coors, Anheuser-Busch, all these major, well, they weren't major at the time, but they were there at the very beginning. And so today they are the major American brand names because they were there first. And this is, it's a whole new awakening and a reawakening from what I would call another dark ages of humankind, to be without our entheogenic teachers for so long, and the corruption that ensued, and how we have all been held down by many different factions fighting for control of the human mind and body. And without these entheogens, we have been so broken. And now there's this renaissance happening, except it's happening in a time of amazing technology and abilities to reach around the world. And it's interesting how quickly it's unfolding. And it's a multifaceted thing, because you've got the people that were sort of doing it underground all along, that had the forums and everything, that are sort of older and wiser, and they've all sort of been there, done that, that really are kind of opting out of the conversation for the most part. And then there's those of us on technology going, holy shit, we got to talk about what just happened to me, man. And we're doing it on this public forum. And then you've got the rise of corporations. And then you've got the rise of science in the middle of it. And then you've got the political talking head people and the lobbyists that are like, we don't know how we really want all this to happen. And all of the people going, now that our minds are opening, fuck you. And it's all sort of happening simultaneously, that 50 years from now, kids will look back on it and be like, oh yeah, that's an interesting time to be alive. That's cool. Anyway, whatever. And but there will be name brands that will be well known, and there will be people who were instrumental in that movement, like the McKennas, you know. So it's interesting to me to be here now, watching it all unfold, and watching you spearhead the concept and the idea of the tourism in it, and being the first person that I've seen say, okay, look, let me help you out. It's a wide world out there. There's a lot of corruption going on. You don't have to take it. You don't have to be afraid. I've struggled and dealt with things, so you don't have to. Let me help you out. And I think what you're doing, because I know when I was first wanting to do Aya and I looked at it, I was so overwhelmed. I'm like, shit, I'll just wait, because I can't figure out where to go. And I'm reading bad stories and all this stuff, and I can't figure it out. So you just got back, and I want you to talk about, firstly, why ayahuasca the first time you ever did it. 2, why did you keep going back? And 3, you're starting a new series, and I want you to tell me why and tell us about it.
Okay. So the first one, why ayahuasca? And I think this is one of those things where it's, I probably struggle to give you a rational answer here. I think similar to your own story of, like, you know, you were at some kind of low point in your life, and then you just came across this mushroom, and it just called to you. And I don't know if even, you know, if you could say it just did, and so you did. And that's kind of how I felt around ayahuasca. I'd just gone through this fairly turbulent transition point in my life, and I didn't even understand at the time that it was turbulent. But I'd just moved out to Switzerland. I'd left all my family behind. Not all my family, my wife and kids came with me, but I'd left my life that I knew, my comfort zone of England behind. That I'd moved to Switzerland, started this new job, and there was a lot of others. I was kind of approaching my 40th birthday. I had all this kind of stuff going on, and it was I started having very bad anxiety attacks. And I just felt this call to, it just seemed like ayahuasca had appeared in my consciousness because of videos and podcasts I was listening to. But it was, out of all the kind of substances, this was the one that was like saying, this one. So I tried it a few places in Europe without a huge amount of success. And then just something in me just said, look, if you're going to do this, then just do it at the source. Go to the Amazon, do it, and then you'll know. And if nothing happens or it doesn't work, then you'll know, and then you can close that chapter in your life and move on to something else. And so, that was what pulled me to go into South America for the first time. And when I was out there, I had just a very, to call it a powerful experience would be ridiculous. It was absolutely game-changing experience. And I just fell in love with the place. It's just so lush and so green, and it's just completely different from my ordinary world. It's like this monkeys just crawling in the trees and parrots flying up to you, and tarantulas and stuff just in your bedroom. It was just kind of what I needed. It was what I needed to just find myself really at that point. So that's how I ended up there. And then once I started sort of working with ayahuasca, I just realized like how the problems I was having around anxiety were just tied in to this kind of stuff I'd just been sweeping under the rug all my life. And without trying to get too morbid, it kind of tied back to this, that my mother killed herself when I was young. And the kind of the simple fact of it is just, I just never gotten over it.
How old were you?
3.
See, how are you going to process something like that at 3?
Well, that's it. But I didn't even know that I had something to process, because I think the way that society is structured kind of tells you that, you know, time heals all wounds, that, you know, you just get through something and yeah, just get through it. Just, you know, the phrase like, get over it. Like, get over it. Your mother's dead. Get over it. Like, all the love that you have as a child that you want to give to your mother, all the love that is supposed to come back to you. Yeah, it's just not there. Just get over it. You know, and I kind of realized this is one of the things where ayahuasca just shone a light on, which no other sort of psychedelic had done before. And it's brutal. I mean, to have that realization as like a guy in your 40s, that you've missed out on what is like a fundamental contract of like a human being. You know, when a woman, you know, gives birth, you're like making a contract with the universe that, you know, I'm gonna look after this thing. I'm gonna protect this thing. This is, you know, I'm its mother. It means something to be a mother and a father, to be parents. And that, it just kind of occurred to me like, shit, I don't have that. And I've never had it. And I just felt a fucking void within me, and that I didn't even realize was there. And so, yeah, the kind of the thing with ayahuasca is that it is fairly stark in how it presents these things to you in ways that can be deeply upsetting and deeply disturbing. And this is why it's kind of notorious, rightfully so, as it can be. It's an ordeal. You go through an ordeal in this. It is not fun or recreational in any way. You get shown things from like the deepest, darkest parts of your soul. Like, I mean, just to talk about my most recent experience, I spent because it was only a week or so ago I got back, and I spent like a kind of Tuesday night a week ago. Was it last week? Yeah, I think it was, or the week before. Just reliving my life as a 3-year-old. And just picture that, if you've ever seen, which I'm sure you have, if you've ever seen a toddler in a supermarket where it loses sight of its parent, and it's like, you know, you can read the expression. It's face, like, where is she? Like, where's my mother? Like, where is she? And you see that, and then it gets to a point where it breaks down, and because there's just no, it's like, where is my fucking mother? Like, and then they'll just have like an emotional collapse. And that was me for like 4 hours straight on like a couple of weeks ago. I was just living this emotional maelstrom of like abandonment and loneliness. And again, this sounds extremely morbid, but afterwards first of all, the thing that like I understood that afterwards, and I hadn't understood it before. And I'd connected with a part of myself that I'd kind of just built a brick wall around. And and having processed that, having gone through the kind of like the full emotional loop, I felt so much better for it in the morning. I felt so unburdened, while the night itself was an introspective nightmare. In that, like, afterwards, I was, you feel great, because it's that you get to close the loop on one of these kind of traumas. And I think that's a lot of where kind of trauma comes from. You know, something happens to you, and you kind of, you know, your body goes through an emotional process, and you need to get to the end of that process before you can move on. It would be a bit like, you know, if you sort of, you know, your best friend just walked up to you and just smacked you across the face and then just immediately walked away. And then you'd be like, you know, there's something unfinished there, and you have to like, oh, hey, what the fuck just happened there, you know, and have it, and you need to resolve that conflict. And I just hadn't done that around any of this deep-rooted childhood stuff. And that's where I think ayahuasca really helps, because it kicks your ass like that, like nothing else I've ever experienced does. And I wouldn't recommend it for everyone, because sometimes that ass kicking can be deeply sort of disturbing in itself. And but the place where I was, where I felt I was at a point in my life where it was, I wasn't afraid to get the ass kicking. I was ready to face it. I was like, okay, if this is what it's going to be, then this is what it's going to be. And I don't think I was there, say, 10 years ago. I would have avoided that at all costs. But now I'm sort of like, my kind of mindset is, if there is something within me that needs to be processed, that I need to get, that I'm willing to go through it, even if it means a bad night, a rough night. And like I say, having gone through it, I'm feeling so much better and so much more connected with myself now. And I don't think I'm healed, but I do think I'm healing. And I was able to, like, the following night, I was able to kind of like make a bit of peace. I sat there, and again, I had it on ayahuasca, and I was able to sort of connect with this ideal that I've got as a mother, because I didn't know her. She wasn't around long enough for me to know her. But I was able to forgive her for the things that she couldn't give me. And I was able to thank her for the things that she did give me, which, my life, the fact that I'm here. And I'm decided I'm going to, she must have been in a terrible place to make that choice that she did. And while I might never understand why she did that or what position she was in, I am going to honor what she gave to me. And that is my life. And so I think the best thing I can do now with my life is not dwell on that and sort of, I'm not sweeping it under the rug. I'm not going to eradicate these wounds. I'm going to grow around them. I'm going to keep on going. And I think that's the best way I can honor my mother. And that's all stuff that I have only been able to process because of ayahuasca, because it gave me that kind of ass kicking. Because otherwise, I was just your typical stiff upper lip British knob. I was like, I just wasn't capable of having those things. So I think ayahuasca is amazing for helping with these kind of deep rooted traumas. But yeah, you have to be ready to face your own demons, because they will be front and center stage. It's shockingly so.
How many times have you been back?
To Peru, I've been back, is it 4 or 5 times now? And I've been, some of those trips have involved me going to multiple locations. So sometimes I've gone just to the jungle. Sometimes I've gone just to the Sacred Valley, which is where like Machu Picchu and all these ruins are. And sometimes I've sort of dabbled between both and moved around a little bit. But I think this was my 4th time in the jungle. And I do prefer the jungle setting, just because it's so sort of vivid and green. And yeah, I wonder if I'll go back again. It's just such a, by the time you get to the end of one of these retreats, you're like, oh my God, I'm so glad to be going home. But and I think, is that it? Am I done? And I could see myself going back again, because like I say, I think I've still got work to do. But I'm not in any mad rush to do it again. It's an experience. But I also just want to throw it there, in case I've given your audience the wrong, not quite the full picture. I would say that an ayahuasca ceremony, as well as having all that potential for darkness and facing your demons, it is also one of the most beautiful experiences I think a human being can experience. There is nothing quite like it, especially when you are, one of the reasons I go to the jungle is because you're immersed in this culture of these people who their culture has been built around having a relationship with these psychedelic medicines. It's the opposite of our culture, where like you talk about prohibition, things being locked off. These guys can talk about the transcendent just as easily as they're talking about like the eggs they had for breakfast. It's just baked in. And when you see these shamans communicate with an experience that you know, you're in this experience, and it's extraordinary. The mindset and the stuff that you are seeing and feeling is like beyond the words that I've got. And yet there's these people who can orchestrate and have, you know, will offer songs up to just, you know, they refer to it as the spirits, but to like just a transcendent experience. It's amazing. And you sat there like, God, it's so detached from your own culture. I'm sat thinking, this is fucking amazing. This is like, yeah, you can see why people like fall in love with it and just disappear off into the Amazon, because it just seems like such a pure way of life. That it's, yeah, I mean, I would say that if anybody feels the call to do it, and yeah, is up for that challenge of going to Amazon, then do it. It's amazing. It's a privilege to be able to witness it. And this ties into what you were saying earlier about the age that we're in. Like, Jesus Christ, the fact that some guy from the UK can jump in a tin can and fly across the world on something that he arranged via this piece of technology called the internet, and I can sit there and sample this culture, which otherwise I've got no way would even exist, and it's had such a profound effect on it. This is a gift. Like, we are in a golden age here, and it's certainly a golden age that we can fuck up spectacularly. But yeah, I just feel so lucky to be alive right now, and just to have experienced what I've experienced. It's incredible.
So speaking of fucking it up, then it seems like you're called the same way that I'm called to help fix misinformation about Amanita, because I don't want people to get hurt. I don't want people to suffer. You seem to be sort of doing the same thing about keeping people from being hurt and suffering that want to try Aya and want to go somewhere and do it. And so you told me that you're going to be starting a new series.
Yeah. So what it kind of occurred to me, there's so much kind of preparation that goes into one of these things. And, you know, you almost have to become like your own travel agent kind of thing, you know, and like you said, you have to, there's decisions to be made around which one of these centers do I go to? Is this the right one for me? What happens when, you know, I'm going to this foreign country? You know, what do I need to know? What do I even need to pack? Like, you know, what's the difference between going to the Sacred Valley versus going to somewhere like the jungle? And I think this is all, you know, this is just like practical, objective information. And it's stuff that I would want, you know, people to be able to access readily. Because I get messages all the time from people saying, you know, what about this? What about this? Plus, we've got the added complication these days that there's a pandemic going on, and some places require, you know, do I need to get tested here? Do I need this? You know, do I need malaria shots? Like all this stuff. So I started putting this series together, which I call like a beginner's guide to ayahuasca. And I'm going to put my third video on that series out this weekend. So far I've covered things like how to choose a center, because, you know, there's a vast spectrum of different centers, ones that will cater to all kinds of budgets, all kinds of needs, and, you know, all, you know, even different sort of like locations and requirements. So it could be that, say, you know, somebody, say, you know, like someone who's female and who's traveling on their own, and perhaps who's had like a history of sexual abuse, might have different kind of needs from what they want from one of these retreats than, say, someone like me who's, you know, sort of, I'm traveling on my own, and I've got a different set of things I'm looking to handle. So, you know, perhaps people want to have like all female shamans. Perhaps people want to be in a big social group and do sort of, you know, activities, and as well as doing the ayahuasca, they want to go off and explore the jungle. Perhaps somebody wants a very intimate relationship with a shaman. Perhaps it's just one-on-one. You know, some people want to sort of have, what sometimes it's called a more authentic experience, where it's just them dealing direct with, someone in a village, or perhaps you want to have a much more curated experience, where there's translators, interpreters there, and sort of there's a bigger framework of how you get guided through this kind of therapy. And so that's what I wanted to offer, is like, if you are feeling this call to go on an ayahuasca retreat, then ask yourself, like, what do you want from this? And then find the thing that will accommodate what you want. If you really want a swimming pool and air conditioning, then make sure the center you've got has got those, because most of them don't. Most of them have got tarantulas and and mice running around. So I was kind of putting out that information, and then I'm going to sort of go through all kinds of different things, like how to cope with bugs and insects and what kind of things to pack. And then there's all this kind of stuff around the ayahuasca diet. There's a certain diet that you need to follow before you take it. So I'm going to try and cover all these things to give a kind of no bullshit, just playlist of videos that people can watch through and hopefully feel a bit more informed before they sort of book one of these things.
It's such an important thing, and I can't believe no one's thought of it yet. And we're very grateful for you doing it. And I'm lucky enough that I have ways to contact you. So if I needed information, I could just hit you up. But your channel has zoomed on ahead of mine, because YouTube didn't like what I was doing. So they have done their best to keep my numbers from going up. But you're what, 15 now? 15,000?
Subscribers, it's just touching 21 at the moment.
Oh, Jesus. So it's harder for people to get those same answers from you. And it would take you a long time to ask them a bunch of questions. Okay, well, what do you want about this or that? So this is really kind of a big deal, because like you said, if I were female traveling alone, I probably wouldn't even go. I would think there's no safe way for me to do it. And then I would wind up having to bring someone along that I don't want to bring along. And it would double my cost if I had to pay for them to go too. And then being autistic, like, I definitely have some things I wouldn't be able to deal with. And knowing that, I wouldn't go, because I always heard this or I always heard that. So it makes me very happy that you're doing this series, because people that come to me, this is my opinion about Amanita. Amanita stops the panic and gets you to a point where you can actually do the work you need to do, which for me next may be ayahuasca. It has taken me 3 years just to get my anxiety and the panic under control, and to learn the sources of it, because you can't find the sources if your alarm bells are going off all the time. Once you can shut the alarm bells up, then you can listen to all the sources of your anxiety. And it took me 3 years to sort of work all that out and get it out of my life, just so I can go, okay, what's your trauma? What do you want to learn? Where do you need to go? Where should you start? And I feel like my journey is only just now beginning. And Mad Honey and doing a fully decarboxylated form of Amanita that I call Soma, I believe my theory about Soma, those two experiences were the beginnings of touching on something incredibly beautiful. And then my 8.5 grams of psilocybin were the beginnings of meeting the machine elves and the construct of reality, and hearing the universal hum and going, okay, based on those experiences, they didn't really heal me. They were profound. So I think to knock some walls down with those things, the only place I know to go is ayahuasca. Like, that's the place I know to go to start kicking walls down.
Yeah, no, I think just, in regards to what you just said about, your anxieties about going, then we can fix that. When you're up for going, you give me a shout and we'll work something out. We'll head down there together, because I'd love to sit in the ceremony with you and see what you make of that. And I think just to sort of, I think what I'm doing around these things with these beginner's guide to ayahuasca, this is exactly, what I loved about what you were doing with Amanita, because I was in, the exact same situation. I had these kind of questions around Amanita, and all I had in my head was like poisonous mushroom. And it was your channel that sort of helped me get through that. And I always know, when I still get questions about Amanita. I actually had some while I was on my way to Peru, and I just said, here's Amanita Dreamer's website, go check it out. She's got it all categorized, and she can sort of, talk you through it.
Thanks.
And it just absolutely sucks that sort of, that YouTube has sort of yeah, it was such a pain in the ass around it. And I even got a message the other day saying, what happened to your, like my Amanita videos? Are like, yeah, they got pulled. That was that. It's yeah, it's a shitty situation. But for sure, I mean, yeah, when you are ready to take that step with ayahuasca, then yeah, give me a shout and
I've been busy this year because of what YouTube did in March. I had to just pull all the Amanita content and build a website.
Yeah.
And that was insane. Like I was working 12, 15-hour days, just sleeping 5 hours, working. And as soon as I got that up and running, the Welcome to Mushroom Hour podcast dropped on the same day that the article on Discover Magazine dropped about me. And so then I was just, my life exploded. And then the Adventures Through the Mind with James Gesso, that one dropped. And then it just exploded again. And now my Etsy store. And so it's been an incredible ride and really beautiful. And I'm really grateful. And so now when I can get my business end of things organized and sort of breathe from the storm, then I'm going to Canada here in a couple of weeks to do some collaborations. But come November, I'm going to breathe and reorganize and sort of get back to making the kind of content I wanted to make through the winter. And I'm going to be preparing mentally for ayahuasca. So I think that ayahuasca should be something probably for the spring or early summer.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if I end up going back again, which I'm like I said, I'm sure I will, because I've been pretty much going every year apart from the kind of the pandemic year. So yeah, I mean, I could see myself going back to one center or another, say, yeah, spring, summertime next year, because like I said, I still feel like I've got work to do there.
Is there a better time of year to go? Does it matter?
I wouldn't say it's better, but one thing I noticed this time, well, it's not really that I noticed. It was kind of shocked me, to be honest. But the height of the Amazon, the river itself, can change drastically. Like I think it was like about 8 meters lower than what it had been previously there. So I was at the same center I'd been at 2 times before. One time I was the whole thing was basically flooded. It was just like water. The whole thing was like a space station floating in water. The second time I went, there was like a little bit of grassland you can move around. And this time you couldn't even see the Amazon. It was like you had to hike to get to the center because the water was just so much lower. So the place changes so much over time. I can't even imagine what it's like to live there. It's just like you're just in this constant state of flux, and how much you can move around is just tied to the river. But I think I don't know. I am an hour, but I did enjoy it more. I enjoyed it a lot this time because there was more places that you could walk to. You didn't feel like you were kind of like trapped within a sort of like a bubble of this retreat center, because we're just surrounded by water. You could actually walk off in different directions and walk to like neighboring villages and stuff like that. So I would say this kind of August, September time was a pretty good time to go. If you go in April, May time, that's when the whole thing's flooded, and yeah, you're very limited in where you can move around. Also,
I cover stuff like that on videos, like times of year and stuff.
I hadn't planned on doing, because I think it would depend on which center you went to. That would be quite center specific. If you go into one which is on the banks of the Amazon, then you would definitely notice what I've just talked about. But some of these centers are kind of quite inland, so it wouldn't make a difference at that point. I've got like a list of topics I'm going to try and cover as part of this beginner's guide, and that might be one. I think that the next one I'm about to put out, like I say, is all about like I say, just it's very related to the kind of pandemic situation. So I think the video I'm about to put out is hopefully going to be redundant at some point, but it's just around the kind of like the testing that you need to get done and forms that you need to fill in online and stuff like that.
So I've been thinking a lot lately about, and it's interesting because you know how you'll get on a thought or an idea, and then other people will sort of mirror it and echo that same thing back to you, the synchronicities. And the big theme that's circulating lately is because you told me, remember I told you that I don't do spirituality, that I just believe it's all science, and we have yet to just find terms for it or explain it all. And since then, I've been trying to challenge that and allow more mystical, ethereal experiences. And Mad Honey definitely has pushed me in that direction. And wondering now about the common thread through all living things. And if there's a common thread through all living things, that we all have different ways of perceiving the world, the way that I saw the world through the bee's eyes, and the level of ecstasy that it was just to be in a flower, right? And then if I want to experience the world through a different animal's eyes, is there an entheogen for that? Do other animals, when they use entheogens, the few that do, can they possibly see the world through our eyes? Can fungi morph into seeing the world through different consciousnesses' eyes? If reincarnation is a thing, and we talk only about reincarnating as other animals, what about reincarnating as plants or fungi? And why are we always limiting ourselves to human reincarnation? And then, like, there's this cat on TikTok that uses a light to say yes or no, and its human will ask them questions, and the cat says that it was a human in its last life. And then in India, you know, they believe in reincarnation in different species. But why do we always limit it to animals? And why is it not plants? And why is it not fungi? So all of this stuff has been in my head lately. And I think I'm wanting to start classifying it as just all very ethereal and beautiful and magical, which I think is what people call spiritual. And what gave me that was that bee. Being that bee, doing Mad Honey, that blew the whole thing open for me into thinking, okay, I do think that there's something ethereal and spiritual and beautiful and magical going on that science, I don't think will ever explain.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a few things to sort of unpack there. My personal sort of take on spirituality has always just been that it's, when you talk about someone being a spiritual person, I think it's that we have, like, each person has a sort of a higher power, a higher ideal that we hold ourselves to. There is something that we want to be. You know, I know who I want to be. I know, and I also know what I don't want to be. I don't want to be an arsehole. I don't want to be a bad parent, you know. So by knowing what I don't want to be, I can create an ideal for myself of who I want to be. And for some people, you know, you can map that onto something else, like something like Christ or Allah or you know, whatever. But for me, so I have an ideal of who I want to be. And when I am aligned with that ideal, when I feel like I'm at peace and that I'm making progress at, I feel that is when I feel what I would refer to as spirituality. And then I think within that, there is this bigger sense of my place within the universe. And like you say, who is Rob in regards to just, you know, the space around me, in regards to other people, in regards to the animals, in regards to this planet, in regards to my lineage, like in regards to like where I'm going with my children, just all this. And this kind of, I think, feeds into this, you know, what I refer to as like the transcendent, is there is something here which is bigger than me. And I don't think I can just boil it down to just my need to have genetics and just pass on my genetic line. And that might be the actual, like, the underlying programming of it. But in my subjective experience, something bigger is happening. Just like, you know, my relationship with Rachel, my wife, like I love that woman. There's something going on here which is more than just my need to have sex and procreate. Like, and I cannot quantify it. And I consider myself extremely skeptical and extremely scientific, but there's no amount of, you know, you could take a blood sample and see how many hormones are in my blood and give me a number, and it doesn't come close to quantifying what I feel for that woman or those children in the other room, or the, you know, my hopes for the future, or, you know, where I feel like I came from. And I think it ties into this a bigger sense of the word spiritual. And I think by being open to that, I actually do feel like a bit more of a complete person than when I was very sort of just like, oh, well, it's just, the lights are off, you're dead. The lights are on, you're alive. You just go through, fuck people over and then you die. And then it's fine. Just be an arsehole with everybody because it's funny. It's, there's something within these experiences, these psychedelic experiences. And I'll share one that I had again just a couple of weeks ago, where I was just exposed to a vision and an experience, call it hallucination or whatever, but I was plugged into like a network of pure consciousness, whereby, and this kind of ties into what you were saying earlier, like just like consciousness is just a cloud, like a collective consciousness, and where parts of it would break off to experience itself as matter, whether that matter was a human being or a bee or a cat or a tree, like trees, like as a living being, but they're just experiencing things in a time scale that is just completely alien to us humans. It's growing so slowly and such peace, and everything takes place over decades rather than over the sort of seconds and minutes that we're used to. And I was experiencing that consciousness projects itself into matter so that it can understand what matter is, because pure consciousness just is just this ball of limitless imagination. And while I was in there, I was sort of experiencing myself and all these other kind of like conscious systems. It just interlocked together, and just whatever thought came to mind was just like instantly manifesting. So somebody was just thinking like the most amazing ballet ever possible, and it just happened. And then someone else was just thinking like having sex, and that was just happening. And somebody else was thinking quantum mathematics of the highest order, and all these things, just whatever thought could be imagined, instantly manifested. And then that thought itself would transform into the most perfect evolution of itself. And just this whole collective was just in absolute joyous rapture at the pure, just like ecstatic exuberance of just making things happen. And I was just experiencing this as like, holy shit, what is going on? And I'll just throw in why I think I was experiencing this. And this was directly the night after the nightmare introspection of my mother, and all this kind of suicide stuff. And I believe what ayahuasca was showing me here was that on that first night, this was me completely boxing myself in. I was a victim. I was a child. I am that guy whose mother committed suicide. I am that guy who is lonely and abandoned and rejected. I am this, I am that, I am boxed in. And I had to experience all that. But on the night that followed, it was like, no, you are none of that. You are a being of like limitless creativity, limitless potential. You do not have to put yourself into one of these boxes. You can do anything. Just like, look, you're just creating galaxies with a wave of your hand. And it's a very over dramatic way of putting it, but it really, when I went through that experience, I came out of thinking, yeah, shit, I am all these labels that I'd given myself. I'm not that. I am not like, if someone said to me like, who are you? And I would say, oh yeah, I'm this guy, this happened to me. It's like, no, that's what you are not. And by knowing what you are not, you can sort of get to the place of knowing what you are. And that was really a theme of this whole retreat was, yeah, I am that. I am that which is left. What remains after I've discarded all those labels, all those things that don't serve me anymore, all that bullshit, all that anxiety that I'd packed on top of myself, that's not me. When you get rid of all that, what remains? I am that. And this, I don't know how this comes across, but to me, this was a fucking revelation. I was like, I kind of just unburdened myself of so much shit in that night. And this is why this would be one of the best retreats I've been on. I've come away just feeling like, like kind of reborn. Just to sort of just to use that old
well,
cliche.
it's helping me make sense of when I hear people talk about this is density.
Mm-hmm.
And we have different densities and then different dimensions that move upward and outward, right? And that's a concept and an idea, but it's really hard to wrap your brain around. And when I was listening to you talk, I'm like, God, but that makes so much sense, because it's the dichotomy of incarnating. We come here because we want to experience emotion. We want to experience gravity. And the only way you can feel the wind in your hair is because of gravity. And the only way that you can feel what it's like to jump up and then land in like a trampoline or out of an airplane. The only way to feel sex is because of gravity. Like everything is because of gravity and density. And we're slowing time down, because here you can really hurt people if you just manifest everything you think about. So it's so dense. It's like moving through molasses, like syrupy density, so that you don't just create things because they're not going to disappear. If you spend time manifesting something, it better be something good, or you're going to hurt a lot of people and damage a lot of things, including yourself. And it's sort of the dichotomy of coming here to experience that joy of creation and the beauty of being here, and the sun and the ocean and the sunrises and the mountains and all the different biomes and the cold and the heat and all of it. You've got to give up the fluid. You've got to sit in the friction of the density, because the only way you can have speed is you got to have friction, so the tires have something to grip to create the speed. And the only way you can feel speed is because you have gravity as its antithesis. So you have to give up to get. And it's interesting when you talk like that, in like when I was on that high dose psilocybin, and they're just so about everything. And we're coming to them with these very human, all-encompassing issues that we're experiencing because we wanted to experience it, which means you got to have the shit along with the fun stuff. And we forget where we were, which I still don't know why we have to have that forgetful thing. But we get to the other side, and they're so fluid. It's so free and open and fluid, and it moves. Everything is so malleable, and you think it and then it's there and then it's gone. And if it's negative, well, then you can get rid of it. And everything is just so quick and easy and beautiful and fluid, fluidity. And it reminds me of a new lesson that I'm dealing with Amanita, and that's time travel. So I'm learning time travel, which we can all do when we're on entheogens. You think it and there you are. And also when I was doing 5 years of meditation, which I think was probably, pushing my DMT levels in my brain, I could back out of my body and then out of our cosmos and then out of reality and then spin it all around on a board and realize I don't know which way was past and future, because it's all just lights on a board now anyway. And so it's all simultaneous. But that was just sort of an interesting concept. And then recently the elders, because I'm just in constant contact now with the Amanita elders, and they tell me, the way that you can get in touch with us all the time when you smoke Amanita, and now a lot of times when you're not even on it, and you can ask our opinion of things, which is also all of my ancestors, but also the fungal ancestors, then you are the ancestors of those that are going to be coming after you, including your own self in 10 years. Like you are the ancestor to yourself 10 years from now. And if you could do something now to help yourself in 10 years, you would do it. And what if, though, then in 10 years, you needed to be able to ask your elder self the same way you ask your elders now for information? Then I realized I can time travel. I can time travel to the future to speak to my future self, because my future self is already speaking to me now. So all I got to do is listen, because she clearly learned this 10 years ago from the me that's sitting here right now. And she has carried it into the future and perfected it so well that she's probably pinging me all the time and I have yet to answer. I'm just now waking up to realizing how to hear her voice and listen to her guidance to change the things now that in retrospect, I look back and go, that was the moment I should have done that. And this would have turned out very differently. So it's interesting that I'm learning time travel now, that maybe we can do
I love the way you put
that.
that.
It's interesting we could do that, incarnate, because we can certainly do it out of bodies or realities or whatever, wherever we go. So it's fun to think that I can play with that.
Yeah,
in this dimension.
That sort of that feeling of lineage, and I love that what you just said about sort of lineage within yourself, because yeah, I mean, I think that is kind of, you know, since you said that, I'm just thinking of this on the fly, but yeah, you know, when we are on these kind of like journeys to, you know, better ourselves, and really what it's got like, it's like a love letter to your future, isn't it? You know, you kind of, you know, when we talk about like resolving trauma and sort of overcoming these things, it's, you know, like I say, it's almost like you're doing something today. You are making these kind of sacrifices today, and, you know, taking these steps today to, yeah, basically sort of project a better you into the future, and all the possible effects that can come from that better version of you, and all the, you know, all the light that can come from it, and all the love that you can sort of, that can radiate out of it. So yeah, I'll have to think some more on that concept. But in regards to like lineage, which was something I mean, just like I was talking about earlier, I consider myself somebody with zero lineage. I was like the person whose lineage was broken, like when my mother killed herself. But then one of the things I experienced early on with ayahuasca was just this sense of where I had come from, of where I was going, of my place in this. I remember one time I was sat there looking at my hand and just thinking, like, holy shit, like I am a human being. And at some point, like at the beginning of time, like the very first human being would have like held their hand up, and probably obviously not in English, but thought like, this is my hand. I am a human being. This means something, you know, there is a connection between me here and like the very first conscious human, whoever had that thought, and the struggles that human went through to, you know, get off the savannas and sort of migrate through Europe and get to, you know, so that I can be here speaking this clunky English language. You know, it's staggering. It really gave me a strong sense of comfort as to, yeah, who I was, where I was, what it meant to get here, and just gratitude, absolute gratitude at the sacrifices of all my ancestors. And as you mentioned, you know, like the sacrifices that are going to have to come future, like so that my children's children, and the rest of sort of humanity, and just us as a species, and us as a planet, as a system, sort of whizzing around the universe. It's such a humbling experience. It staggers me. It absolutely just makes me like drop to your knees sometimes. Like, it's amazing.
And we think about, I don't know about you, what you studied, but you know, I don't remember what the term is, but if you make in a system, if you make a small error, the further down the line that error travels, the larger the error becomes, and the larger the problem or the result becomes further down the line.
Yeah, and cascading error. So
that, and if you think about that in the terms of lineage and the trauma that got your mom to a point where she would unalive herself, knowing she was going to be leaving a child, that strong urge to protect that child had to have been so damaged. So that would have been the accumulation of probably generations of trauma that she thought she was probably ending, which she wasn't. I mean, she just, sent it on to you. But then likewise, I think about my generational trauma, and I was aware of it very young and said, I don't want to carry this forward, put myself in a lot of therapy, and definitely was a better parent. Although with my story and the benzos, they still have some therapy to deal with that 10 years of when I was on benzodiazepines, and not a good human for anybody. But overall, in general, I changed so much about toxic parenting and behavior. And they are now on good trajectories for themselves. And they are so good, I can't imagine that in one generation, they're going off in this completely different direction now. And it reminds me that we're only making small corrections each time we make a better choice. Each time we suck it up and don't yell and think, why am I so upset here? What's triggering me? This is what I should do about it. And this is how, and you choose consciously how to do it, accumulates into a decade of better behavior and better spousing and better parenting, which is going to only grow further down the line year after year. And then if your children have children, how much better are they, barring societal trauma or natural disaster trauma, and hopefully they could deal with those things better. But barring those kinds of things, we think in terms of long-term change, but we don't think of how big those changes can actually become. That just by myself, I basically moved a boulder of just generational toxicity in one lifetime. I just completely shifted it into a completely different direction. But what if we could do it even faster than that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's almost kind of, I think it's one of the things that we're always stuck within our own bubble, and so we always kind of think like this is as good as it can get. And I think this is one of the kind of the miracles of the last 10 years, that the fact that we, at some point soon, like psychedelics and entheogens are going to be like completely legal. I never thought this was even going to be ever on the horizon in my lifetime, but it's happening now. So yeah, these kind of, hopefully what we're talking about now is going to become commonplace. This is going to become the standard, so that people like you and me aren't going to have to sit here in our sort of midlife and talk around these things, because these things will have been dealt with earlier, if they even exist at all. God, if this kind of experience was available to me in my 20s, then, what kind of different trajectory could I be on? But then, of course, there's a question of, would I have been ready for it in my 20s? And I'm not sure I would have. Maybe it's just one of those things where you need to, you need to get to the right place in your life. And that makes me think actually about what you said, because I wonder, is it just like, I don't know if these kind of changes that we're talking about, like the boulders that you're talking about moving, was that possible, like with, say, like your mother's generation or my mother's generation? Like when I talked to like my grandparents about what was going on around that time, and it was just such a different time. And we're talking about sort of like, there was like teen pregnancies involved and things, people being put up for adoption and stuff like that. And it was just a different time. And it makes me very grateful for this age that we live in now, whereby, there are options today that just weren't there, say, in like the 1940s or stuff like that. So I do feel like society and humanity, like some people are very sort of pessimistic about like the world is fucked and all this. I don't think that's true at all. I think that there is progression. I'm very optimistic that things are on the right path. Doesn't mean there's not huge room for improvement and there's not like catastrophes happening all over the place. There definitely is. But this shift in sort of what seems to be like a baseline operating system, whereby, we recognize that, say, when a woman has an abortion, that, this is not just a throwaway act, and there is, there's some compassion and there's some, there's some trauma that might need to be worked through here, and that, when we see it with our sort of military veterans here, it's not just like get back from the war and get back to it. Let's help these people overcome horrific fucking things that they've seen. So I do feel like super optimistic around this kind of global shift. And in a way, then it does make me feel kind of sad that, maybe like my parents and their parents, and they had to come through a different time where, yeah, that kind of stuff wasn't available. And so it's not really surprising that that kind of intergenerational trauma kind of ended up stacking up and landing on our faces. What do you think about that? Is it like a product of our times, or? Oh, I think we lost
I
sound.
know that my parents and the trauma they were going through, and I've asked them why they didn't get therapy, and they just laugh. They're like, what therapy? That wasn't a thing.
Mm-hmm.
You pretty much had to suck it up and deal with it, and in unhealthy ways. And there's a lot of talk right now about other rights for other people and recognizing people like me that are autistic and have a different neurotype, or in the LGBTQA plus community, and then older people saying, oh, well, you're just being a snowflake and you don't need all of that. But at the same time, like, all of this always existed, and those people didn't, that by that whole shoving it down, they offed themselves. They exited the gene pool pretty early. Like, they were no longer around to be, the people who made it to elder years only made it because they either drank their way there. The contractors are back. My kitchen is still under construction. So I understand that they couldn't have, but also we tore down family systems that were healthy, and we locked away the drugs that we needed, and we made drugs that were destructive. Yeah. Enter the benzodiazepines that, cost my children a lot of their mother. And I don't know. And so you can say, well, the times weren't there and they didn't have it. And then I want to go to, well, then you can get into the whole darkness and the fight and the spiritual war and all of that. And I'm not one of those people that gets into war stuff, and I don't like to frame things in that light. There's definitely shitty people that do shitty things, but if you ask them, they are convinced they're doing good and that that's the right thing that they're supposed to be doing, and they feel called to do it. So I don't believe anyone is like, I wake up today and I choose evil. People don't wake up and decide that. They think that they're doing good, and people that know that they're not okay are fighting, doing the shitty things, and then they break, and then they feel shame for doing it. There are very few people on the planet that don't feel shame, and that it's just so elite and rare. So most people are trying to do the best that they can. So I don't really believe too much in using the terminology around war, but there's definitely just been this awful shift toward darker things. And I feel like there's a bigger awakening happening. And I don't think it's because it was the right time. I think it's because there's just so many billions. What are we on? Closing in on 9?
Yeah, something like that. It's
insane. And there's inertia in that many humans being here at the same time, incarnate. We have mass, we have energy, and we have motion, and we have love, and we're moving it. And I believe, rather than it's a war, it's just ourselves pushing against all the darkness that's been here for so long. And we've been doing it mostly without entheogens. And now, with all of our calling and the manifesting by billions of us, we're finally using what's here to get the word out and wake the world up to these things existing, and then changing the paradigm and the construct's mind about them, and hopefully changing the brainwashing that's been going on about them. And then once that happens and it starts taking off, it will grow exponentially. We will all be able to sort of lighten up, be push more love and less pain and less anxiety and less fighting with ourselves, more enlightenment, more beauty, more manifesting. I believe it's not a war with evil as much as it's been a war with density and older paradigms and living without the entheogens. And it's we're pushing against ourselves. And once we finally can push against the darkness and the generational trauma and open it, we're just going to be springing forward so rapidly into so much beauty and so much goodness. That's what I think. That's what I think.
No, I agree. And I think one of the things that around sort of like the entheogens have been suppressed, and it's, what I revere so much around my time in Peru is that we in the kind of West, we have lost this sense of community, because this is one of the ways we would have that community. We would get together, we would celebrate our humanity through, taking these entheogens and, having sort of like a ceremony or a social get together, an offering sort of, praise, or, just getting in touch with our humanity. And that got stripped away a little bit, I think, in the previous couple of generations. And now that it's coming back, I think people are beginning to see the value in this sense of community again, and the sense of kind of doing having a spiritual practice. And I realized that, that people repel from that because it sounds kind of woo-woo, and I certainly did. But I think there is something beautiful about being able to get together with other human beings and just offer up a bit of gratitude to the universe. Like, it doesn't have to be to God or Yahweh or Allah or whatever, but just to, even to the highest form of humanity, or to the earth or whatever. And just like, just to be able to offer something in the form of a song or a prayer or a dance or just to take part in a community is a beautiful thing. And again, it's one of the reasons I really love that culture in Peru, because it calls to me and offers me that sense of community, which is just so missing, like in your life of your average English person. And I think that's something I think I'd like to see come back in as these entheogens come back into the mainstream, come back into the out of prohibition, come into sort of, being legally available. There's something that's going to have to come with it just to stop us falling into it in the way that we kind of fell into alcohol and it just becoming an intoxicant. And I think we need to build up these kind of spiritual communities, spiritual systems along with it, so that we can sort of, and really, I think, get the best out of it as a culture. Because this is the bit where I said earlier, we could fuck it up. It could get really messy, but if we get it right, then I think what we're talking about is something like what I just described in that last ayahuasca trip, where it's just we'll be talking about a collective of conscious super beings, experiencing things in an entirely new way, and that's just going to be awesome if it comes to pass.
This whole thing that you said too about community, the Amanita is so much about community and about us rejoicing together, celebrating together, coming together, networking with each other. And I'm teaching a class right now with the San Francisco Psychedelic Society on microdosing. It's a microdosing course of all the things that the Amanitas taught me through the years of microdosing and what that mushroom tends to push. And community is the big thing. It's why I do my retreats. I do a winter retreat and a summer retreat, and on the solstices to do it like we used to do, to come together as a people and celebrate or whatever, and take part in the mushroom and have ceremony and everything and celebrate. And the mushroom is all about making sure we all work together, not only because the humans need it to save ourselves, but the mushrooms need it for us to save them. Because once we take the mushroom and we understand it's not just the human community, it's the earth community, it's the living things on the planet community. Yeah,
it's a conscious community. I think it's like we're saying, it's all conscious systems. I think we've all got this symbiosis, and when you feel it when you take this sort of mushroom into you, feel this consciousness within you, and you feel it with all these plants, and then you just feel your connectedness to everything. So I think, this, when I talk about this sense of you feel something bigger than you, I feel something bigger than Rob. And I only could have realized that with the help of these plants. And it's a very joyous thing to sort of realize that you are part of something bigger. And I think the fact that you do all these retreats and stuff, I think it's just awesome. I've kind of, it's something I've kind of toyed with a little bit myself, but I've just, at the moment where I'm at, I don't think I've got the right amount of energy to be able to pull that off. But that you do these things and still, get in there and play the drums and sort of, celebrate the solstice, I think is awesome. It's exactly the sort of thing I'm talking about, where that kind of community vibe is needed. And if I kind of wish I lived closer to you, because I would be all over those
You would
retreats.
be welcome to come too with your drums. You have to bring your drums and play.
Do you know
with
what?
us.
I've not touched my drum hardly this year, and when I was in Peru, I was like, oh my God, I've neglected my drum so much. I really need to get back to it. And I think it was part of how I could tell that my mind was in the wrong place, because I was almost afraid of playing my drum. I was afraid of allowing myself to sort of connect with it like that. And now that I've got back, I'm like, right, okay, let's make some noise. And I feel like so much like more up for it. I really want to, embrace that kind of that music again. But it was so weird how my mental headspace was tied into, like, you know, when I don't know, do you get this? Like when you're in one of these funks, you know what's good for you, but you just don't do it. You know that it would be good for you to hang out with some people, or to play your drum, or to go out for a walk, but you just kind of want to just like cower under your bed or something like that. I really shut down from it. And that was kind of how I knew that I needed to just get my ass kicked in Peru. Is like, yeah, okay, this is ridiculous now. You just time to go and sort yourself out. But yeah, I need to go and apologize to my drum.
It's cool too, because I'm the same way. I mean, I'm autistic. I don't like, I made this channel in the privacy of my own home, and me and just a camera and me just uploading, and I can sit and wait and do comments and answer people when I feel like it. And that has exploded into Zoom meetings that I then have to come down from for hours until finally I'm doing podcasts, which I have no control over the editing of, which then I come down from over like a week. And then now these classes that people can take the information and it goes out there. And then people now, corporations wanting me to advise them. And it's like, okay, now the mushroom is saying, okay, now you have to start the community. You've got to do retreats in person. And I'm like, no, that's just, this is enough. We're not going to do the whole in-person thing. And again, the mushroom is like, but have we not like been steering you in the right direction? And do you not feel like you're fulfilling your purpose and your destiny? You've got to do this. And I did it, but I don't always feel like it. And the closer it gets, the more I want to just hide in my house and be like, I can't do this. I can't handle it. The weight of it is huge. The fear is huge. The interacting is exhausting. And it's always uplifting and beautiful every single time I do it. But also I smoke an insane amount of Amanita, and I trance, and I go into the elders, but everybody else is too. Probably not as much as me, but I know that it's how we have always done it, and my body remembers.
So that's kind of an interesting thing, because I mean that's what the shamans do in Peru, and it blows my mind that they can even function while in these kind of trance states. So when you drink ayahuasca, you drink it, and then the shamans drink it, and then I'm like back on my mat, like eyes just kind of like. And these shamans are sort of conducting this ceremony and singing and sort of dancing and just to how I think it's that what you just mentioned is that when it's your kind of call to do it, you just sort of do it, and I don't think I'm there yet. I don't think I've got the kind of the fortitude to be able to do something like that. I'm not sure it's my calling. I think I'm a better PR person than I am a sort of a facilitator. So maybe that's my calling. But I really like the idea of service, of like what you're doing, like sort of giving up something to something bigger than myself. Like just doing something that's not for me. It's in service to others. And this was one thing. It kind of occurred to me this thought while I was in Peru, and sometimes you need the bathroom in the middle of one of these ceremonies. So you get a torch out, you flash a torch, and a facilitator will come over to help you. And these people will just help you to the bathroom while you are going through the most bizarre experience of your life. And so just walking to the bathroom is incredible. And these people will just, they'll just do it. They'll completely separate their ego. They won't intrude into your experience, and they'll just walk you to the bathroom wait for you patiently while you sit there on the toilet for about half an hour going, just yeah. And even weirder, sometimes like you're in one of these bathrooms in the jungle, there's like frogs in the sink, like real frogs, not hallucination ones, but you know, there's like frogs there and stuff, and you're tripping all sorts of stuff. And then, you know, then you come and you'll be stumbling all over the place. They'll put you back to your mat, and then you can just like go back into your experience. And I was thinking, these people are just fucking angels. These people are just giving up their time to just live this incredibly simple life and, like I say, help people through extraordinary experiences. And I was, again, just felt super gratitude for them. And that was, maybe I was thinking like, maybe that's something I would like to do. I would like to give back a bit that way by being one of these helper types, like giving some service rather than being the one who's like holding space. I don't think I'd be a good space holder, but I would like to be able to help people through these experiences. So I think that's maybe something I'm going to look into, maybe once my once my kids are a bit older and they don't need me around as much. But yeah, I can see myself doing one of these like long-term, like I guess like working in one of these centers, and sort of just, like I say, doing a bit of service, giving something up for something. I think that would be something that seems like it would be good for my soul, but like I say, it might be some years before I manage to do that. And in the meantime, I'll do what I do on my channel and do service that way.
I'm speaking tomorrow for the San Francisco Psychedelic Society, and we're
awesome.
talking on, well, the theme of it is ecodelia, like ecology and psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's all the mushroom has been pushing and talking to me about, because I've got 4 major flushing sites that I get most of my Amanita from. 3 of them have been clear cut this year, and it's just been devastating, like heart-wrenching, because they're like family. Right. And it's very timely to be talking about it. And I'm going to be closing this up soon, because they're all about to be making even more noise. And I'm not going to stop them, because my kitchen has been under construction for 3 months because of a shortage of materials. So I'm finally getting near the end of it, and I don't want to stop them. I want them to work. So we're going to do this again. We do this like twice a year. So whenever you can break free, I know your kids are young and mine are older, so I have a little bit more time now to do stuff and travel or whatever, but you're always welcome here. I love our conversations. You always have a place to stay. I'm looking at maybe a European trip next fall, so maybe I'll be able to come and we'll collab in person. Better. And yeah, cool. I would love to.
Well, you know, yeah, I always love talking to you, and yeah, let's do it again sometime, because it's I always have so much fun and love watching your stuff. I love catching up with you, and I hope your kitchen gets finished soon.
Me too, man. I don't think I can handle much more of this. Thanks for being on the channel.
It's my pleasure.
And Adeptus Psychonautica, I'll put the link on the screen. I'll put it in the description. I'll pin it to the first comment, and go follow him and check out what he does. But you can also talk to him. He has a Discord, and your people are also my people, and they talk to me about your Discord.
Yeah. We've got quite a few mutual supporters, which is nice. It makes it feel like sort of a big sort of family that we've got going on, which I love.
I love it. So if y'all aren't subscribed to either one of us and you just happened upon this, or you're only subscribed to one or the other of us, join the whole little thing. We also have Patreons where we do Zooms and get together. So there's lots of ways to get involved and hang out and create community wherever we can. So I love you, awesome. Man. Thank you.
Love you too. And I look forward to talking to you soon.
Okay, bye.
All right. Bye, dude.